Hello and welcome back to The Scriptures Are Real. I'm your host or co-host today, Lamar, and this is my co-host and also regular host, Kerry.
Hey, how are you all?
Yeah. I'm doing good. It's been a while since we've been on. You've had so many great guests and stuff. It's been a little while since we've been together.
When I first was thinking of this podcast, and I thought, well, I should have a co-host, and immediately who came to mind, and I don't think it was just my own brain thinking, I think it was beyond that, was Lamar, who Lamar and I were in a singles ward together. We were clerks serving together. And then I think you were even in my very first Old Testament class, if I remember right.
Yeah, that's right. I was in that, and I wrote a paper, and I got to talk to Hugh Nibley about with your paper. He said, "Hey, go over and this is a great topic, and maybe Hugh would talk to you." And so, when he was alive, and I also knew his granddaughter who was going to school at the same time. So I had a great time. I wrote a paper for that I really liked for your class, and it's just been a lot of fun. I got a chance to talk to him and to you, and we kicked around some neat ideas. So yeah, it's been very fun. So that was a long time ago, but
it was that was like a mid to early 90s. Not that we want to talk about how old we are, but and ever since then we've kind of kept in touch about scripture topics and things like that. And plus Lamar's a comedian, and I need someone to make me seem more funny. So, anyway, so we did quite a bit of co-hosting initially, and then as your life got busy and my life got busy, it kind of happened a little bit less, and then I've kind of let that slip a little bit. So I'm here to repent of that. But anyway, we like to co-host together. So I knew that there were a number of people who didn't know Lamar. I guess I should also say Lamar lives in Arizona. I think you run two businesses that you kind of started on your own, just came up besides continuing to do stand-up comedy.
But besides doing stand-up and improv comedy, yeah, it's a pretty busy life. And I moved to Arizona, I moved away from the land of Zion, and now I'm in the land of exile. And Arizona's a great place. It's just
yeah, it is
hotter than I'd like it to be, but it's nice now. So if you want to come golfing now's the time to do it. From here till like May, it'll be good.
Yeah, for half the year, Arizona is exactly the place to be. So
yeah.
Anyway, so that's just so our audience can become reacquainted with Lamar, or if you're newer, then just acquainted with Lamar. And so we're just to take care of a little bit of business, some of which I think is exciting, an announcement I want to make for all of you. But we also want to encourage you. Both Lamar and I are hoping that as many people will hear about this as is possible. And so if you'll do your reviews on Apple Podcasts and download the episode on Apple Podcasts, or leave comments and likes and subscribe and follow Apple Podcasts, do the other things on YouTube or Spotify or whatever, stars, all that stuff, whatever you can do, that helps more people hear about it. And that helps us get the good word out a little bit more. In any case, I also have an announcement that I want to make. So this episode is going to air in mid-November, and this is when a lot of us start to think about Christmas. And I've been talking with publishers, and I was especially thinking about this Book of Mormon year and how my commentary on Isaiah, I'll even get it out, and for those on YouTube, they can see it. My commentary on Isaiah has a lot to do with the Book of Mormon. So you'll find Book of Mormon highlights all throughout there, but I think even more useful at the very end, there's an index here so that you can go through when you're reading, say, First Nephi, whatever, you can look and see, is Isaiah part of this? Because what you'll find is that it's not just the Isaiah chapters or even places where Isaiah is quoted and it's clear he's being quoted. He's referred to a lot more than most people realize. So you can go to this index and see, when I'm reading for this week, there are Isaiah things in here, and you can look at my commentary and see that it will help it. And I think understanding that my other two books with Covenant Book about finding promised blessings and God will prevail are about the covenant. And that also helps you understand the Book of Mormon a lot. So I arranged with Covenant Communications, they're the publisher of those three books, that from November 15th to December 15th, if you get on Siegel Book, so you get on siegelbook.com. And I think you can mention this in the store as well if you go in there, but it'll be easiest if you go to siegelbook.com and you put in the code Kerry. So that's all caps KERRY 25. Then you can get 25% off. So like for Finding Promised Blessings, the book's only $4. So that just makes it $3 or something. But still, you can get 25% off. So that code is KERRY, all caps, 25, Kerry 25, from November 15th to December 15th. you can get a discount. And hopefully that can be, something you get yourself or someone else for Christmas, either the cheap little booklet, you can get that for your kids or whatever, or if you want to really get into Book of Mormon and Isaiah, hopefully all of that will be helpful. I'm just trying to figure out ways to help our audience. We've got a really loyal and wonderful audience. So I'm have some people who are encouraging me what to think of what can we do to help. And I've gotten really excited about it. So I'm looking for all sorts of things that we can do to help out our audience.
I've heard a lot of people talk about your commentary on Isaiah and how it's helpful. It's really helps break it down. Isaiah is one of those hidden books that we really have a hard time with. And I heard a guy just the other day, a great scholar, saying, if you really want to understand the Book of Mormon, you've got to understand Isaiah. And that's where everybody just kind of goes, ooh, and fades out, And it's too bad. That's too bad, because that Isaiah really does give a lot of understanding, but it's not easy. It's not easy unless you have someone kind of pointing out differences in speech and someone's really studied it. So I appreciate your commentary. I'm looking forward to using that when we get to the Isaiah sections of Nephi.
Thank you. Well, and not just those Isaiah sections. So, I agree. You can't understand the Book of Mormon if you don't understand Isaiah. And that's not just for the Isaiah chapter. So just as an example, Jacob's great sermon that we have in 2 Nephi 6 through 10, right. He's really interweaving Isaiah throughout everything he does. And he's interacting, and his audience would have understood, he's interacting with Isaiah. And when we miss it, then we miss some of the richness of what he's doing there. So just little things like that. There are 1,000 places, I think as many places where Isaiah is paraphrased as he's actually quoted, but most of the time we miss that. So hopefully we can help people get more out of the Book of Mormon this way. I think Covenant and Isaiah really help you understand the Book of Mormon a lot. Also understanding Christ. But that's
the ultimate goal, obviously. But that's what Isaiah is testifying of, and sometimes that gets missed. It got missed by a lot of people.
Yep. So I think with that said, so typically when we get on, Lamar kind of hosts, and he has so many great things to share, and then asks me some questions, and we'll just kind of jump in is what I think we're planning to do. Yeah,
my job is to make you look good on this one. You get a host a lot of times. And by the way, shout out to some of your great guests that you've had. I not only am on this podcast, but I also listen to it. And I listen to every episode, and I'm really thankful for all your guests that have come on, had great things to share. People have written books and have commentaries, and they're over studying in Israel now, great stuff like that. So I listen to all those ones, and I appreciate that. But I'm glad to be back, and hopefully we come up with something good that we can talk. And we should say that the theme of this, the scriptures are real, wasn't just another podcast to talk about the scriptures and to get into scholarly this and that, although that's part of the fun. But part of it is that we want to make it real. How do we make it real to us today? And I always talk about when I would teach my classes and in the seminary and so forth, I always had I tried to have action items. I'm like, what can we do today, this week, this month that will make a difference with you or with someone else? So that's kind of what this podcast, hopefully the part of the fun of this podcast is to, how do we make it real? How does this come? And so when you asked me earlier, which ones do you want to cover? And I'm like, I could cover a lot of different ones, but don't count me out of James. Make sure I get to do James. And that's what we're covering today is James 1 through 5. And I'm really excited because there's so many great themes. And so let me just give you a quick overview of what we're going to do now that we got some business out of the way. We're going to talk about the authorship of James, who wrote James. A lot of people may not know this. Maybe some do, but a lot of them don't. Some of the themes in James. Of course, this is going to be a very important chapter for members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because of this is one where Joseph Smith drew a lot of faith drew some inspiration to go originally ask of God what he should do. So talk about lacking of faith in the first chapter. We're talking about faith and works. We're going to solve all the theological problems that anybody's ever had about that.
Just in one day.
Here. Just 5 minutes. Right here. We're going to fix it up. James does a great job on that. And then also there's some other themes there, but controlling our speech, I think, is another one that we want to hit, another theme that we want to hit in chapter 3, because really if we can't control what we're saying, then James says that our religion is for nothing. So let's pay attention to that. So that's what we're going to jump into. So let's first of all talk about that. So Kerry, who wrote James? Is it we hear about Peter, James, and John all the time? Who wrote James?
Well, actually, the answer is Jacob. And so because James is a weird way that the King James, well, and it was before them that it started happening in English among English speakers to translate the name Jacob or Yaakov, or Jacobi, or however you want to say it.
Jacobus is somebody says Jacobus.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think that's how it comes across in the Greek. I think it's Jacobus, and then you get that translated as James, but the name is really Jacob. But this isn't the James, as you said. It's not the James, the Peter, James, and John. That James is actually killed very early on. We read about that in Acts, and so this is James, the brother, which would mean half brother. James, the half brother of Jesus.
Right. There's at least 4 Jameses mentioned in the Bible. There's James, the son of Zebedee, which is the James of the apostles Peter, James, John. We always hear, and so when we're going to talk about Peter next. Comes in our reading will come Peter. So we think, well, James and Peter. This is that James. It's most likely not. Most indications are that this is James, the half brother of Jesus, and who, by the way, early on in Matthew, it talks about James didn't believe Jesus at first, or at least he didn't believe his messiahship.
Yeah,
it took a little while for him to come around. So.
Yeah. And then he becomes one of the strongest leaders in the church. We've encountered him in Acts a few times because he's the head of the church in Jerusalem. As Peter and everyone else goes traveling. He's the one. You'll cast your mind back to the Great Jerusalem Council, and that's the James that's in there that says, "Okay, all right, we think you're right, Peter," and so on. So he is the one who keeps really the first branch. I think you could call the Jerusalem branch the first branch of the church. He's the one that keeps it running, right? He's the one that with all of the original converts, he is their leader. And it keeps the church going there for a long time through some really difficult persecution. This is persecution from their fellow Jews, right? The kind of stuff that was killing Stephen and that Paul was part of, and so on. James is the one that shepherds them through all of that and keeps them faithful. So really an amazing guy. Yeah,
you got to think this is the head where the Sanhedrin is, and all the other big councils there of the Jews. It's all in Jerusalem, so he's right in the middle of the person. I mean, they're the ones that put Jesus to death, right? So he's got. I think of him as like the area authority, maybe.
There you go.
This is the first bishop, in the early church would be like the first bishop. So so he's a very well spoken. And this is interesting. Sometimes they call this the wisdom literature. Like you have Proverbs and Psalms, and some of those books there in the Old Testament, which they consider which are referred to as wisdom literature.
Yeah.
Because of the use of like similes and metaphors and that kind of thing. And this is what they call the wisdom literature of the New Testament. And it seems to be very well steeped in the Sermon on the Mount. He refers to themes that come over and over in Sermon on the Mount, and he refers to them in a prosaic type of way, consider this. And so we'll talk about some of those. So that's the author, James, the brother of Jesus.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just say he kind of intermixes like Proverbs and Sermon on the Mount, almost like equally kind of intertwining them, because I think for James and you'll see he's clearly steeped in what we would call the Old Testament, right? He has we don't know exactly the audience, but it's I would guess the Jerusalem group, but anyway, it's a very Jewish audience. He's steeped in that stuff, but he has made the Sermon on the Mount like the new Proverbs, as it were. And as he's trying to give advice to this group, he really intermixes proverb themes and Sermon on the Mount themes, and kind of sets it all up in chapter 1, and then keeps going through it, with a bunch of messages through the rest.
Yeah, and historically, this looks like to be one of the last to be added to the canon, but was likely written more toward the beginning, maybe before some of the epistles of Paul. And we just came off of a really long group of epistles or letters from what we assume to be Paul. Most times they are from Paul. It says, it's from Paul there. We assume that that's the writer, but we're assuming those ones are Paul. So we have a whole lot of Pauline epistles or letters and instruction from him. And Paul has a very specific, I don't say very specific, but he has a goal in mind to bring about some new thinking to people that are stuck in the old ways. So that's his kind of thing is like, hey, we need to move on. It's It's not about how large your hem of your garment is, or the phylacteries or whatever you have. It's not about those things. It's about faith in Jesus Christ and so forth, which is all great stuff. But James is writing to the same type of people, and he has a little more emphasis on works, not over faith. But we'll get to that in chapter 2, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But that's who we're writing to, and that's the kind of audience that James has. And he writes it to but he writes it to all the tribes of Israel, scattered abroad, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting. So this isn't just for Jerusalem; it's to go out to everybody. But again, his audience is people who are just coming online to Christianity from being from Judaism or maybe some of the other religions in the area. So that's his audience. Yeah. So let's just jump right in here. In verse 5, of course, members of the church will jump on this right away. They'll know this. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. Now, of course, that's what sets off Joseph Smith from the beginning. He takes that. He's like, hey, I don't need to have it interpreted by this person or that person. I can ask God. This is an open invitation for us to seek connection with God.
Yeah. And I love, even if we continue on with the next verse, let him ask in faith, nothing wavering.
Nothing wavering.
So, I mean, it's clear that Joseph Smith believed, and clearly the Spirit kind of guided him. This is what you need to do, and he had this assurance. He thought he was going to get an answer. But this is setting up the chapter 2 discussion on faith and works in some ways, but it starts out with James saying, no, the faith is where this starts, and you have to really have faith. And then in chapter 2, he'll talk about what it looks like when you have faith unwavering. But he, first of all, is letting us know, here's what's at stake. If you need to know, and we all lack wisdom, we all need to know something, right? And again, that's that Proverbs theme. The theme of Proverbs is you need wisdom from God. So he starts it out right here. You need wisdom from God, and God is really willing to give it to you. And it reminds me of President Packer once saying, we live beneath our privileges of inspiration and so on. God wants to give us more than we seem to be ready to accept or to even ask for. But it's contingent upon really having faith. And as I said, we'll talk about what that looks like later. But he starts the whole epistle out with that idea that we've got to have unwavering faith. Now, that doesn't mean you're in trouble if you ever have questions or doubts or so on. And it doesn't mean like if you are have something difficult and you've got some questions for God, like, why is this happening to me? I don't think that means that your faith is wavering. But and if your faith has wavered, that's okay. Come back and try again, right? But we can take this the wrong way to mean, okay, well, I'm out because I had some questions, and that's not what it means. Yeah.
No. I think he's setting up the inquiry. So it's first you have faith, and put all your faith in, not just sort of throw up a prayer and, hey, I need some wisdom, and then off you go on your daily thing. He's saying, hey, be sincere. And then next he's going to talk about getting your heart straight. So get rid of all this stuff, get out of the world. So those things. So he's setting up a pattern here. Come to God with faith and really mean it, and put your faith into it. Get out of the world. And I like this in verse 21. This is kind of a funny thing that I don't know. Lay apart all filthiness and superfluity of naughtiness.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite scriptural phrases ever.
Me too. I think of it all the time. Like, when the kids are going out, the teenagers say, hey, don't have any superfluity of naughtiness.
That's right.
So it's just a funny thing. But just the way it's filthiness or rampant wickedness is kind of what we're talking about. Other translations will put it that. So yeah, but I think it's hilarious that superfluity of naughtiness. But anyway. Yeah. If I had a tattoo, that's what I'd put a tattoo. I don't like tattoos, but if I did, superfluity of naughtiness. Yes. It would be like a no sign.
It is. That's right. Yeah. We should use that phrase more. And I think you're right. In fact, if we're going to, one of the ways I think we can make this real is to bring it down into the way we're thinking of it and working through it today. And if I were going to say the two main themes of James. Oh, and I want to come back. Remind me. I want to come back to like the audience in just 1 second. But the two main themes of James, I would say it's faith and thinking celestial.
Okay.
Right. So that's part of what this the be careful about how you speak, or not having a superfluity of naughtiness, as just look for that theme as you go through. And I think we're going to see he is again and again and again saying you've got to think celestial instead of think worldly. Quit thinking worldly, think celestial. So,
Yeah,
and
that's
he just
great.
has a bunch of ways he has us look at it. Sorry.
No, that's a super good. I like that. And the way he puts it in there, the reason that this is kind of big language, filthiness or rampant wickedness. So he's obviously, I mean, scriptures are written to the people in the day. So he's dealing with people that have stuff all around him. There's a lot of things happening. Jerusalem had just, I mean, if you look at the Jerusalem walls, just outside of that wall and down the hill is where we get the word for hell. And
Yeah.
they have the groves and just rampant wickedness. I mean, it's not a big place. So just right over the hill, there's just terrible stuff going on. And over here, you got this. So he's saying, look, have faith, nothing wavering, and then get out of the world. Just, like you said, think celestial. You've got to get above that. That's where we have a phrase in our church, to be in the world, but not of the world. Look, the world has some really cool stuff. I love, there's the nature and there's the history and men do really great, men and women, people in general do great things, have great works of art. That's all great. But the world, when we talk about the world, it's just the excesses and all the greed and everything else that sneaks in there and corrupts mankind. Yeah. That's what we're talking about.
Well, and again, if we're going to borrow from President Nelson, I think we could say that a worldly view is a myopic view, right? As opposed to the thinking celestial. We're thinking of it's as if there is no God and there is no hereafter with opportunities for kingdoms of glory. If we're going to think President Oaks' recent talk, right? Instead, you're thinking, well, what can the world give me rather than what can God give me? And you're thinking, what can I get between now and when I'm 50 or 70 or die, rather than how are things going to work for me in the eternities? And I think that's that key difference. You can tell when it's worldly because it's myopic, as opposed to a celestial or an eternal viewpoint.
Right. Yeah. Immediate gratification, what you want right now, but it doesn't do good for setting up for the future. You're going to get right now. And if there any time in the world that I can think of, this time right now, when you can get almost whatever you want by the push of a button, by a click of this and tap on this, and you can get almost whatever you want. And there's a lot of problems that come along with that. He's going to talk about that in James will mention that in about the rich. You'll have a warning to the rich in the 5th chapter. But that's perfect. So you can see the theme he's setting up there: the faith, the getting out of the world, setting up with the celestial idea, and then he goes right into some action. He talks.
Oh, before we jump there, can I talk about the audience? Please. At the very beginning, and I forgot. So we don't know exactly the audience, but he does have an interesting thing here in verse 1, right, where he says it is to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad. Now that's interesting, and he may really mean the literal descendants of Israel, because he is a Jew writing from Jerusalem, and he's wanting to gather Israel. But this sets us up with this notion of gathering Israel that President Nelson really wants us to focus on. And for us, we gather literal Israel, but the point is that as Israel is gathered in, that we bring the whole world with us, and everyone can become part of Israel. Right. And I don't know if that's what James or Jacobus or Yaakov is thinking, but I think that it affects the way he writes this. So many scholars will say once we get to chapter 2 that he's got 12 sections. And that seems to be kind of a theme that he's going with because of the 12 tribes. And so that may influence actually why he's addressing the 12 tribes, because that's just going to be his kind of governing, outline unit, is to say, I'm going to do one section for each of the 12 sons of Israel. And so we want to gather Israel, but we'll also look, and I don't know that we need to go into and say, here's one section, here's the next section, but we want to keep in mind that he would like to make everyone part of Israel and gather Israel to the Messiah. That's his real goal. So I think it's worth keeping that in mind as well. So sorry, now back to where you were.
No, be sorry. That's great. That's part of setting up what he's going to. But he goes verse 21. He's talking about get out of the world, receive the meekness and grafted word, which is able to save your soul. So get rid of the wickedness and embrace the meekness. And then he says,
and I love that phrase, engrafted word, right?
Engrafted word.
This idea of a graft, that's when you take a branch and you make it so that it literally becomes part of the tree. It's interwoven and it is part of a tree, right? And that's what the word of God needs to become part of us, so that it's not a separate thing from us. It's part of who we are. I love that imagery.
It's not something you adopt on Sunday or when you go to synagogue or whatever you're doing. It's something that you become. So you become that part. And then he immediately goes in there in verse 22, he said, but be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. So that's part of engrafting it. You can't be a listener of the word and passively, like you go to church and you listen for a couple of hours and then you go home and watch the game or whatever. Yeah. That's not really what he's talking about. He's like, be doers of the word. So once you hear it, you go out and do stuff. You need to be, and that's how you engraft it. When you're doing if you're learning algebra or something like that, you can't just watch the professor do it on the board or the teacher do it on the board. You have to apply it. You have to do it, because by doing it, you understand the concept. Okay, I get the concept. This goes with this, x squared, blah, blah, blah. So once you do the homework, then you get it engrafted in you, and that's how you do it. But so you can't just be hearers only. You can't be passive Sunday listeners. You've got to be doers of the word. So take what you hear, go out, do it. We'll talk about that next year in Alma 32 and how you grow faith, how it starts out as a seed and then grows into something big. So be doers. So if any hearers, oh, go ahead. No,
I was going to say, this is part of his theme that we're also seeing, and it was like verse 8. He said, "A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways." One of his big things is, if you are real in your faith, then it's going to look this way. If you're not real, you're double-minded, right? So if you say you have faith, but you're not a doer, you're double-minded. It's you're not pure intent. This is the pure of heart, pure intent part of the Sermon on the Mount idea, right? And so I think he gave us the concept in verse 8, saying double-minded man is unstable, but he's showing us why they're unstable down here, where, if you say you believe but you don't do it, then actually nothing good comes from you and you're unstable.
Yeah, are you really believing? Right.
Yeah.
If you believe something can save you, then you're going to do something. If someone throws you a life preserver, you're drowning and you throw a life preserver, but you don't believe the life preserver is going to save you, then you're going to drown. You got to reach, you got to grab, you got to do something. You got to have an action in there that makes that faith take hold.
Right.
Excellent. So if any hearer of the word be not a doer, he's likened to a man beholding the natural face of God. So he's talking about looking into a mirror. So you look at yourself in a mirror for a minute, and then you walk away, and then you forget who you were.
Yeah.
And this is from the Sermon on the Mount, right? We talk about the sower who sows the seeds, and there's some seeds that fall in different ground, right? Some get eaten by the birds and never take root. Some take root and grow quickly in the sun, but then fade away as soon as the heat comes, the heat of the day. That seed fades away. So there are some that will hear it and they're excited a little bit, but then they just forget who they are. They aren't doing it daily or whatever it is that draws them away. And we hope to bring them back. We'll talk about that later in chapter 4. But
and that phrase in that parable, the cares of the world, it fits in exactly with what James is talking about here, right? We start to think about the world too much. And so we forget who we really are and what we're really wanting.
That's right. So get rid of the filthy, the superfluity of naughtiness. So
that's
anyway,
right.
So so he beholds, and so anyway, that's what he's getting into. And I also like the way he calls it the perfect law of liberty. So we just came from the law of Moses, which we're not saying anything against the law of Moses. That was to prepare people, but the law of liberty now takes effect. And when you talk about liberty, you're talking about these are things that make you free. So John 8:32, and you shall know the truth, and you shall make you free. So now we're talking about these things, even though these are laws, they don't restrict you. They are laws of liberty. They are laws that will allow you to grow and be free from other things, right?
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Yeah. So that's and then so when you look at this, sometimes you read little pieces, and it's like someone has taken little bits and pieces of a sermon and just kind of put them down. Like Proverbs isn't like one beginning to end letter; it's part. You look at this and you think, well, maybe these are just bits and pieces, but the themes are still laid out. I don't think so. I think this is really like written, like you said, like the 12 tribes. He's dealing with certain themes. So now he's going to come back again to what you need to do. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say chapter 1 is especially chopped up that way, like because I think he's introducing the things that go more into depth in the other chapters. So you've just got snippet, 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 and then okay, we're going to flesh them out a little bit more later.
This is his executive summary.
That's exactly right.
He's giving you like we did at the beginning of the podcast. We gave you an overview of what you're going to hear. He's giving you an overview of what you're going to hear, and so now he's going to start developing the themes. And again, he's going to talk about this a little bit later. If any man among you seem to be religious and bridleth not his tongue, but be deceiver in his heart, but deceiveth his own heart, this man's religion is vain. So people are going to judge you by what you say and what you do, not by your attendance at church, or by you showing up here, or by what you're wearing, or religious garb, or a necklace or something. It's not about that. It's going to be about what you do and what you say. And I think I'm going to use this one when we talk about faith and works. There's a song that one of our hymns, have I done any good in the world today? Have I helped anyone in need? Have I cheered up cheered up the sad, or made someone feel glad? If not, I have failed indeed. So in the same way, the tongue can hurt someone by something you say to them, criticism. It also can help someone.
Yeah.
By a cheerful word. Have I cheered up the sad, or made someone feel glad? So what are you doing to help? So the tongue can control what you're doing, both for good and for bad. So watch what you say. So now he's got the whole chapter 1 set up, and of course this wasn't written in chapters, but we broke it up in chapters because according to the themes. And so now he's going to start developing on these themes. And so
before we go on to the next chapter, were you about to go on, or?
Yeah, I was going to go on, but go ahead anytime.
I just have to talk about 26. So this is probably the verse that has become most real for me in all of the book of James. I just think about this one so often. Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this: to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. That comes to me so often that to me, this is where it can get really, really real. If you really believe in God and you really love God, then what we ought to be doing is helping people who are having a hard time. I think that's what he's saying here, right? Plus, keep yourself unspotted from the world. So that's avoid the worldliness, but so that's the avoid. But the what do you do? What do you replace that with?
Right.
Is going and helping people. That's what our religion is all about, right? And when I hear this, I kind of have to think of the story, and I maybe not recounted it correctly, but I think so. But the way I remember the story is Joseph Smith was with a group of people, and it was reported that someone's house had burned down, and everyone was talking about how badly they felt for this person. And Joseph Smith said, I feel bad to them to the tune of $5. Here's $5 to help you. Did anyone else feel bad for them? Right. And right then they raised some money to help them rebuild their house. Right. And that's when it becomes real. That's pure religion, to say, I'm going to go and help. And sometimes it's in the money, but a lot of times it's, you just go and be there for people. We had some people in our ward who had a tragedy, and sometimes what they needed was just someone to just be there. Didn't have to say anything or whatever. Right. And I think there are all sorts of things we can do. We can all think of someone who's lonely. Yeah. And just go be there, right? That's pure religion. So this is a very, very real verse for me, because I have to ask myself, okay, you just wrote and said a lot of stuff, but did you go do anything? Did you go visit anyone and help someone, your next door neighbor that was in? So I'm glad to be helping someone. We have listeners in New Zealand, and that's a good ways away from where I live. I wish I was in New Zealand sometimes, but anyway, but I've got someone across the street from me that I really should go visit, and that's pure religion and undefiled.
Absolutely. And this is really the definition of charity, right?
Yes.
We've talked about this before, and I'm so glad you didn't let me skip over that, because I have this triple underlined here. The pure religion, this is really breaking it down. This is what we do. Of course, keeping you unspotted from the world. That's the commandments and the things we should be doing personally, but helping others, that charity. Now, and again, we've talked about this when we went through other scriptures, but oftentimes we think about charity as the money giving, which is important, and that's great. But that's not all charity is. Charity is, what are we doing? What do we do to help our fellow man? What do we do to help them out? To stand with those and stand in need of comfort, like you were just mentioning. So this is really charity. I have charity connected with this verse here. This is one of my verses on charity, pure religion, because it says that elsewhere. We'll get to that in some of our other topics. But pure religion, undefiled before God, is to visit the fatherless, the widows and their afflictions, and keep unspotted from the world. So he encapsulated quite nice. Just 27 alone is a sermon to itself, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. So now let's go on. He goes on into chapter 2, and this I think is where you're talking about. He breaks it out. So he talks about faith in the Lord Jesus Christ and not be a respecter of persons. He's going to hit that theme a couple times, and apparently in the Jerusalem area there is, and look, there's no you should always be respectful of people, but the rich people don't get the rich people, or people who have some sort of fame, don't get the first benches in the pews all the time. It's not about that. It's not about giving deference because of what the world is saying. We're all equal in the church. Sure, it's nice to show respect to the bishop or whatever, or to stand when the prophet comes into general conference. All those things are good. We're not talking about those kind of things, and just being respectful of people in general is good. But we're talking about wearing costly apparel. Again, we can sum it up with the word pride. If pride comes into it, then we're out of bounds already.
Yeah.
If it's you're being respectful to somebody because that's out of love, or because you respect the person or the office or the title, whatever, that's fine. But when pride comes into it, when you think you are better than somebody, then we have a problem. That's where the pride starts coming in. I hear President Benson's talks from the 80s coming into my head, so.
Yeah, or if you are thinking someone else is better because they have wealth or fame, and you treat them that way, right?
Right.
You're right. It's, again, that's all judging according to the world's standards of success, rather than God's standards. And even with God's standards, so even with that, we have to be careful. So yes, this person may be seeming like they're keeping the commandments more than that person. That doesn't mean that we treat them differently. We treat them both with love. So.
Right. And then, yeah, exactly. And now he brings in a little bit of, he's going to talk about the law. And we're talking about now, again, the law. We could say that it's the law of Moses or the 10 commandments, whatever you're considering the law, what they should be doing, their practical instruction. In verse 10, whoever shall keep the law and offend on one point is guilty of all. So here's where he's going to bring out the faith and works. It's going to come up here. But he's like, if you've broken one part of the law, you broke the whole law. So that, sometimes we call that legalism, or it's been said in academic circles, it's legalism. Like, sometimes the ancient Israel gets in trouble for trying to be too legalistic. You're trying to make the law, a prescribed this many steps on Sunday, or this, you're the border of your garments look like this, and all that kind of stuff. And he talks about that here. You're guilty of the whole law. For he that said, do not commit adulteries also shall not kill if thou commit no adultery. And yet if thou kill, thou become transgressor of the whole law. Well, he picked the big ones right there, first of all.
Yeah.
But he's talking about in general, he's going to set up mercy versus, well, let's just read it here. In verse 13, for he shall have judgment without mercy, and he that has showed no mercy, and mercy rejoiceth against judgment. That's kind of the way it's written is a little bit awkward for our ears. Another translation would say, let no one say he is tempted. Whoops, I'm sorry. That's the wrong translation for there.
Wrong verse, yeah.
Wrong verse there. I was going to read it in a different translation. This is the standard English version, which is sometimes a little bit easier to read for some people because sometimes they reverse their subject. And anyway,
they were Yoda.
That's right.
I meant to say Yoda. They were.
Yes. For judgment without mercy is to one that has shown no mercy. Mercy triumphs over judgment. Is what he's getting to. So anyway, the point in this one is he's saying if you're going to try to be, again, the term legalistic about it, if you've broken a little part of the law, you've broken the whole law. So we're all going to break that. And for
Right.
those of you who are so bent on being specific to the law without showing mercy to others, in other words, being judgmental of other people, then you really don't deserve mercy. Again, he's not setting up for being perfect. He's trying to set up for being non-judgmental, is what he's
Right.
talking about. Let's extend mercy. And I have this statement all the time. Look, people are doing the best they can, a lot of them, and we all could do better, sure. But let's suppose the best of everyone, and if we're going to be hard on somebody, let's be hard on ourselves to do better. Great, but let's not judge everybody else that they should be doing this, they should be doing that, or this, they didn't do this, or they wore that, and we should be wearing this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And this is where it gets tricky, because I think he's absolutely right. If we've broken one part of the law, then he's saying something very similar to what Paul said in a number of places, which is
right.
You can't be saved by the law, because
No.
if you've broken one part of the law, then you've broken the law. And if you were planning on being saved by never doing anything wrong, then you're in trouble. So this is James kind of saying, all right, so we need faith. He doesn't come out and say it quite that clearly, but we need faith because we do break the law. But the tricky part is, as you said, like sometimes we're really judgmental of others, and often when we're judgmental of others, we're also judgmental of ourselves.
Right.
But sometimes we extend mercy to others, but we won't extend it to ourselves. We often call that perfectionism. So this is an element of this that too often we feel like, well, we need to do all these things to be good the way God wants us to be good. And we start focusing on that doing, and that causes us all sorts of problems as well. So that's a problem. But if we toss that out, and I think this is what James is addressing, if we seem to go one side of the pendulum or the other. We either are focusing so much on all the things we need to do that we're in trouble, or we say, okay, well, no, we're just saved by grace or faith. So we focus so much on that that we forget about what we need to do, and we're in trouble. And I think James is trying to get us to the middle ground of that whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why this is one of the reasons why I like these chapters so much, because I think he draws some great distinctions there. He's trying to say that it's not the law that saves you. It's not the law. But we don't throw the law out. We don't throw it out. We're still trying to do those things. We're still trying to keep the commandments. And we're still trying to keep ourselves, he says, keep ourselves unspotted from the world. Well, who's not going to get a little dirt now and then? Everybody's going to get dirt now and then.
Yeah.
So
we live in the dirt.
Yeah, we live. Yeah. So, but we're going to try for, we're going to shoot for perfection. Again, Matthew 5:48, be therefore perfect. Well, okay. Or, again, we talk about perfect, be there complete or fully, the full creation. We're trying to be that. We're not going to be that right now, but that doesn't keep us from trying. So let's read what he says about the faith and works. And so this sets it up perfectly for that. So let's go to verse 14. What did a prophet, brethren, my brethren, though a man say of faith and hath not works, can faith save him? Well, we just got done in Romans, Paul is like saying, hey, it's the faith, you can be saved and all that stuff. And that's where a lot of people draw that from. But James says, can faith save him? And by the way, I might have mentioned this before the show. Martin Luther, the original Martin Luther, who was a great reformer, did not like this book. He called it the Epistle of Straw. He didn't even want to include it in the canon because he thought it was a little too much on the works thing. But I don't think so. I think that the works. I think James draws a great balance, and we'll talk about this when we get to the end of this section.
Yeah, but that's kind of an example of saying, well, that doesn't agree with my theology, so let's throw out an apostle. Right?
That's right.
Yeah, and we do that today. We that happens all the time today.
Oh, yeah, it does.
Okay, the world has convinced me that this, and maybe we have very good intents, but the world's convinced me this way, and President Oaks is saying something different. So let's toss President Oaks.
Yeah, he's not really with it today. That's an old thing. Yeah, exactly. So continuing on in verse 15, if a brother or sister be naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you say unto them, depart in peace, be warmed and filled, notwithstanding you give them those things which are needful of the body. What did the
Or you
prophet
give them not those things.
give them? I'm sorry, give them not those things which are needful of the body. What did the prophet? So, yeah, what have you helped out? Even so, in verse 17, even so, faith, if it hath not works, is dead, being alone. Okay, so this has been raging on forever and ever in theological circles. Um, and like I said at the beginning, we're going to solve all this today in this little hour, half hour, hour and a half, whatever it's going to be. We're going to solve it all today and fix it because everybody missed this statement. And I'm sure that we're the only ones that figured this out.
Yeah.
But I think this is important. And here's what I'll do. If I ever come across this with someone else who's talking about faith, it isn't really the works that save you. It's not about that. We all have different capacities. We, you know, I always think of it as being like a coach, right? So the church is about being a coach, and a lot of times the church takes heat. There's just so many things to do in the church. You just can't possibly do all the things in church. And I feel guilty going just because I know a lot of people that really feel guilty going to church, and that isn't how it should be. And this is where we're talking about not extending mercy to yourself. Look, the church is there to be a coach, and you don't want a coach who gives you excuses. I mean, yeah, well, I'm not feeling it today either. Let's not work out today. Let's, you don't want an Olympic athlete or Olympic coach to be doing that. Let's not try harder. This is good enough. That's not what the church is here for. The church is here to push you, but only we know what our limits are. Again, in Mosiah, we're going to talk about this next year about you can't run faster than you have strength. So it's up to you to determine what drives you. The church is going to be out there and giving you good platitudes and things to try to help you move forward and give you ideas and programs and things like that. But it's up to us to work as hard as we can. Let the Spirit be our guide. We work as hard as we can, but we extend mercy to others and we extend mercy to ourselves. Do you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. 100%. And in fact, maybe I want to come back around to your coaching and athletic analogy, but maybe let's approach it this way as well. If I think if you really believe in God and Christ, so let's say you have real faith, then you believe that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, right? That whosoever believest in him shall have eternal life. I'm cut out part of it there, but if we really believe that God sent his son and that his son can save us, then we will automatically be filled with gratitude and love for them. And we will see how much they love our fellow man, their children. And so we'll be filled with love for them. So this brings us back to this love of God and love of man. And sorry, excuse me. And if you really love God and you really love man, then of course you'll be doing all these things. And I think that's part of what James is saying. It's like, if you're telling me you believe, if you're telling me you love God and you're telling me you love others, then actually I expect I'll see something happen from that. I expect you won't just say to someone, hey, be warm, be full, see you later.
Right.
You'll give them a blanket and you'll give them a hamburger, whatever.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's not so much, he's not saying that faith isn't what saves you. It's that I'm not so sure you really have faith if you're not doing something, because when you really have faith, you really love. And when you really love, you really do something.
Right.
So if that were to come back to your sports analogy, I'll just share a story from my glory days in college football. So if you ever play that game, Two Truth and a Lie, I can always win with this one because I always put out there, I was a center on my football team in college. I don't say that it was a flag football team in world sports. And no one believes that I was the center, but in my intramural flag football team, I was the center, right? And because the center had to block and had to do quick movements, and I'm a small guy, but I could do quick sideways movements. And so I did that, and I loved. I mean, my team they were my friends from grade school and high school and roommates in college, right? I mean, we loved each other and we loved playing with each other, and I wanted to be there. The quarterback is still one of my very best friends, and I wanted to protect that quarterback. That was really my job. I wanted to protect that guy. And so I would do my best, but I can remember there was a time where because of those quick movements, I pulled my hamstring, and I just couldn't do as well. And for a while I had to sit out, and it wasn't because I didn't love playing and I didn't love being with my teammates. I just couldn't play. And then finally I got to where I could play hurt. And that seemed to be working better than me not playing, just because no one else had been in that position, and it was that we were struggling, right? And I didn't do as well playing hurt as I did when I was whole, but I still did what I could because I love my teammates and I wanted to play, right? And I think that's what God is asking of us. Sometimes you'll be really, really good. And let's be clear, on a lot of things on that team, I was not as good as most of my teammates, right? I blocked fairly well, and that was about the only thing I did fairly well. There were some guys who were like so crazy fast, and some guys who could catch no matter what. And our quarterback had a great arm, and none of those were me. And so I had to just be happy letting them do those things and me doing what I could do. And sometimes I couldn't do it, and sometimes I couldn't do it as well. But that didn't matter. My intent was that I wanted to do it. And
right.
I think that's where we are in this whole game. If we do love God and we love his fellow man, we don't need to be worried about, are we doing everything? We'll be doing what we can because we want to do it. And sometimes we can do more and sometimes we can do less. And there will always be someone who can do more than we can do. But they may not be doing what we're doing as well. And all of that doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is, if you love God and you love each other, you're happy that others are doing even more than you can do. And you're happy that you're doing what you can do. And you're just you're going to play hurt sometimes. And sometimes you're going to sit out, but it's okay because it's all happening because of love and faith. And I think that's what he's trying to get at here.
I think so too. And, as I get older and now I'm in my 50s and I've had children and I can, if I can apply it to, I hear myself all the time saying something that's right out of the scriptures. I'll be like, if you just would listen to me, it will be home. I've got so much more experience than you do. If you just would listen, I'm telling you, I have the secret to success. If you just will listen to me.
Oh, amen.
And then I hear the scriptures in my head, like, what am I doing? So applying that same thing to this, and then, we got analogy on top of analogy, but if we were to apply this to God as the Father, and let's say he has a teenager who can, some young man who's full of all kinds of testosterone can do so. He's out, trimming the bushes and cutting the trees, and he's using the chainsaw. And then maybe there's the 8-year-old inside that's doing what they can. They're, washing the dishes, whatever. And then you got the 4-year-old who can maybe pick up her toys,
or maybe hand you the broom so you can sweep.
Right? Or hold the dustpan. That was my job when I was a kid, is hold the dustpan while they swept into it. So the 4-year-old cannot do the same amount of work as the 13-year-old or 14-year-old, that's out there, getting after it and getting things done. Maybe think of someone who's working on the farm. But as a father, you appreciate the work just as well. Yeah. The 4-year-old is doing what the 4-year-old has the capacity to do. The 8-year-old is doing what the 8-year-old can do, and the 14-year-old is doing what the 14-year-old can do. And as long as they're working the best that they can. Now, if one of those is sitting down and not doing, or watching the TV part of the time or whatever they're doing, if they're not doing the full effort, well, then as a father what the full effort is. Like, put the full effort in. Come on, do the full effort of what you can do. And I still know that the 4-year-old's not going to do what the 14-year-old do.
Yeah,
they're just not physically. So in the same analogy, the way the church works, or the way people grow up, there might be different capacities of what they can do, what they understand, what their mental and physical capabilities are might be different, and their time constraints and whatever else they're under. So anyway, I think we've solved it all.
Well, I want to push your analogy just a little bit further,
okay, sure.
And then we will have solved it all. But so, okay. I think of President Nelson, who really, I think even objectively, one of the most gifted people in the world. Just all of the things that he can do, whether that be invent new heart surgeries or be pitch perfect or take complex subjects and be able to reduce them to a couple word phrase and we get it, right? Just incredible. He can do so much more than I can do. Even so, compared to what God can do, if we're going to use that family analogy, God is the adult, is the father that can do all sorts of stuff. And maybe I'm only a 2-year-old, but that makes President Nelson a 6-year-old. right? He can do a lot more than the 2-year-old, but compared to
Sure.
what God can do, it's still not much. So
Oh,
what
yeah.
are we worrying about? I mean, as a father, you don't really care how much more the 6-year-old can do than the 2-year-old, because neither one of them are actually that helpful. Right?
That's right. Yeah.
You're just happy they're helping, and you'll take care. You'll make up the difference, right? And that's where we're at here. And so don't worry if you're a 2-year-old instead of a 6-year-old.
I remember when my 4-year-old, well, 4 or 5, when she was little, and she would come out there and want to help me mow the grass, and I would say that she was my great multiplier. She made every task longer because I mean I could mow the grass, but she wanted to hold on. Yep. Okay, so I'd have her hold on to part of that, but me holding on and waiting for her and going slower, it slowed down my work quite a bit. I could do it way faster, but I appreciate the fact that she was out there. She had her hand on the mower and was doing what she can do, and I'm like, okay, well, let's learn work, and that's what we're here. We're here to learn how to do work, because God didn't get to learn all this stuff because he sat around and thought about it. Look, he went and did some work anyway. So,
and why did your daughter want to help? It's not because mowing the grass is glamorous. It's because she loved you, and she wanted to be with you, and she wanted to help you. And that's what God is looking for. Not that we actually make pushing the lawnmower go better. It's that we want to be pushing it because we love him and we want to help him.
That's right. If we want to be, be like your father in heaven, you want to be like your father. If you want to do that, well, then what are you going to do? You're going to go serve his children. If you love me, feed my sheep, right? Well, how do you feed them? If you just say something like this guy here said, well, be ye warmed and filled, that's not doing anything. Go out and feed them, feed and clothe them, take care of the fatherless, the widows. So yeah, exactly. So get out there and do something. It's not about how much, it's about doing something. And so again, what we talk about, what we do today, this week, this month, this year, can we be better ministers? Can we be better at looking for someone in our ward or neighborhood? Look, I'm telling you, I've said this a million times, but if we wanted to have a better nation, start with your neighborhood. I don't care about the person who wants to go to Congress or do this or make a law. It matters to me more if you went to your neighbor and knew what they needed. What did they need? Good. Because if we had neighborhoods that or communities that were filled with neighborhoods, that neighbors knew neighbors, and communities did good, then the states are made up of communities, and cities are made up of communities, and then the states make up the country. And then if you're in New Zealand, that's great too. So work in your community, but build your own community. Stop looking for someone else to solve all your problems and some magic politician to pass a law that's going to make it all good, or some rich person to pay all the way. It's about you what are you going to do this week? To look at your neighbor and say, hey, they need some help with this, or they could use that, or just a visit. Bring them some cookies. Bring me some cookies. Where's my neighbors? Bring me some cookies.
I'm waiting for the doorbell to ring.
That's right.
Act on your loving impulses, and we'll be good.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so there you go. If these early church fathers had to listen to us, we'd have solved it right there, and we wouldn't have the faith and works issue. All right.
Check. Problem solved.
Ta-da! All done.
To hear us continue this discussion, tune in to part 2.